I think all of us who play video games have a few specific titles that for whatever reason we love and appreciate way more than the average person. Experiences you would absolutely swear by despite the fact that no one else really seems to care. One such game for me is Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy by Eidos-Montreal and Square Enix. Released in 2021, Guardians was dealt a bad hand due to some external factors which we'll cover in this video, ultimately leading many to overlook it. And in my opinion, those who did skip out ended up missing one of the most fun superhero games ever made. In order to get the full story here, we first need to go back to January 2017, when it was announced Marvel and Square Enix had entered a multi-year and multi-game licensing agreement. This came alongside the teaser trailer for an Avengers video game from Crystal Dynamics, developers of the modern Tomb Raider games. I remember this announcement like it was yesterday because I was so unbelievably excited. The idea of an Avengers video game was extremely enticing since we had surprisingly not really gotten something like that before. Even the individual characters hadn't been given much standalone video game love. They would appear in great games like Marvel vs. Capcom or the LEGO Marvel sub-series, but they would never get their own thing in the same vein as Spider-Man or Batman did. While those heroes received highly acclaimed video games, characters like Captain America and Iron Man were stuck with licensed movie tie-ins. Hulk did have a fun game in the PS2 era, but that was about it. And when you consider 2017 was also the peak of the Marvel Cinematic Universe's popularity, it's unsurprising this Avengers project quickly shot up the list of most anticipated games in the world. That hype would need to last a while longer though, as we wouldn't get new info on the collaboration for over 2 years. Finally, at E3 2019, we got to learn more. And initially, it looked pretty promising. It was cinematic, had a killer voice cast, and seemed to be faithfully adapting these characters and their world. But as more information became available, warning signs started to reveal themselves. Square Enix said the game would feature regular content updates, proclaiming the game will, quote, take players on an epic journey delivered over multiple years. That statement, alongside a focus on 4-player co-op and a constantly expanding roster of heroes, made it abundantly clear Avengers would be attempting to cash in on the live service trend. When it did release the following year in September 2020, Avengers received mixed scores from critics. Some felt the campaign was pretty decent, especially when played solo, but basically everything else fell apart immediately after that. It was very low on launch content, had repetitive grinding, and was littered with bugs. This video isn't about the Avengers, so I won't get into it too much more, but the point is, the game sucked. I wanted to highlight that whole situation because when it came time for Square Enix's next Marvel game, this release was still very fresh in the minds of gamers everywhere. At E3 2021, Square Enix revealed Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, and it was unfortunately met with a lot of negativity. Fans saw this, and then saw this, and thought, nope, not happening, they are not going to get me again. But what they were missing was the other logo on the box, Eidos-Montreal, who would be developing this game. The Avengers disaster fell on Crystal Dynamics, not them. I suppose it's worth noting that Eidos-Montreal are credited as a support studio on Avengers, but that's completely different from being lead developers of their own project. However, many gamers ignored or just didn't understand this fact and immediately lumped Guardians in with the Avengers train wreck and assumed it was also going to be bad. To be fair, they didn't exactly do themselves any favors with the reveal and gameplay trailer either. Being able to watch this back now really showcases how poorly they captured the final product. Much of the gameplay trailer consists of Star-Lord slow walking around in the most stereotypical AAA video game way imaginable. Then for some reason, the first combat sequence they chose to show off was against weird cubes of goo with no personality or interesting design whatsoever. I mean, I get you don't want to spoil the cool enemies yet, but talk about a bad first impression. Speaking of bad first impressions, this announcement came at an event titled Square Enix Presents, which was around 40 minutes long in total, and almost half of that runtime was dedicated to just Guardians. Even as someone who was willing to give the game a chance, I was getting sick of seeing it. Now imagine how it must have felt for a Square Enix fan who just wanted some Final Fantasy news. It all culminated into a lot of negative sentiment, which would carry over to its release a few months later on October 26, 2021. The game got decent reviews, but the skepticism remained, and even I was unsure. But almost right away, I could tell this was not going to be another Avengers situation. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Guardians of the Galaxy is a perfect game, but I do think you would be hard-pressed to find one that better translates the tones and themes of its inspirations into video game form. The highlight of the experience is, perhaps unsurprisingly, these characters. I feel like the Guardians are a much more complex group than a lot of people give them credit for. Yes, they are always comical and dancing around to old-school music, but there's also a real sense of pain within them. All of their tragic backstories leading them to come together as a bunch of rejects who do something great, it can be quite moving. Another thing I really enjoy about the Guardians as a group is that they really do feel and act like a family. In between all the bickering and disagreements, they have those special moments together where you can see how ride or die they are for one another. And I feel Eidos-Montreal's game did an exceptional job at portraying this, constantly intertwining the humor with heartfelt one-on-ones or breaking up the arguments with laughter. All in all, they really nailed the interactions you are able to have with each member of the crew. Guardians of the Galaxy features RPG-like dialogue conversations where you get to know each crew member in a deeper way. That's an element of the story I definitely did not expect, but ended up appreciating a lot. For anyone who is a big fan of these characters like I am, it's kind of a dream come true to be able to interact with them in this way, and it's something I haven't seen in a lot of other superhero games. Another surprising but welcome feature was in-game choices that can alter the experience. For example, one early game mission sees the Guardians short on cash. They decide to sell someone off and then sneak in to steal them right back after the payday. As the player, you get to choose whether Rocket or Groot are the bait, slightly tweaking the way things play out. As far as I'm aware, none of these choices you make change things all that much. This isn't some Telltale style story where entire character outcomes and plot lines can be flipped upside down, but it is a fun added layer of interactivity. When you aren't talking with the characters or experiencing the story, the rest of your playtime is spent exploring or in combat. I don't have a ton to say about exploration, it's pretty run-of-the-mill. However, the combat is quite interesting. As the player, you control Star-Lord, but the real focus is on leading the team. Each of the other Guardians have unique abilities and attacks that the player can direct them to perform. The developers described this style as solo team play, where you need to work as a group like you would in a multiplayer setting, even though this is fully single player. For example, using one of Groot's grab abilities to stun an enemy, leaving them vulnerable to one of Gamora's executions. Another focus was having each Guardian act the way you would expect in battle. Drax's AI is very aggressive, often landing him in precarious situations he might need help with, while Rocket stays back to use his guns from range. It creates combat scenarios where all of these characters truly do feel alive. They aren't just standing around waiting for your call, they fight with or without you. But neither you nor the team will have much success without working together. And the addition of an ultimate ability where the team groups up for a pep talk before blaring a song from the 80s as you mow down enemies with your souped up attacks never gets old. I do think it's fair to say combat can become quite repetitive, especially once you find the few key ability combinations that work well, and it can sometimes feel like you are just mashing every button and winning, but I found it to be a lot of fun, and again, a great representation of the Guardians as a group. And that's my main overall takeaway. It's so clear this dev team had a deep love and admiration for the Guardians. They understood these characters and what makes them work, masterfully translating it in interactive ways. And it didn't stop with just the Guardians themselves, but all the characters within their universe, such as Lady Hellbender, who made her first ever appearance outside of comics with this game. Getting an experience that honors my personal favorite Marvel group so much was something I will always cherish. In a lot of ways, it's a miracle Guardians got made the way it did, considering Square Enix's obsession with live service around this time, and the obvious fit it could have been for multiplayer. I'm so thankful we actually got this. It's a little old school and perhaps a bit inelegant at times, but the wild ride you go on is everything I could have wanted or asked for. It's a real shame we will almost certainly never get to see it explored further. In February 2022, it was revealed that Guardians had underperformed commercially, with Square Enix claiming it undershot their expectations. Admittedly though, it's hard to know what this really means, because Square Enix tends to say that about literally all of their games. I mean, seriously, I dare you to look up any big AAA game released by Square Enix that they did not claim to be a disappointment. However, when it comes to the Guardians of the Galaxy, I think this overused statement may have actually been true. No one was talking about this game when it came out, and it got price cuts pretty quickly. Also, no official sales numbers have been put out, which is usually the clearest sign things didn't go according to plan. And when you consider the licensing fees attached to a Marvel product, it's safe to say not a whole ton of money was made here. It's such a shame because most of the reason for this outcome did come down to fans not trusting Square Enix with a Marvel game after Avengers. Even though Guardians was made by a completely different dev team and actually was the exact kind of game everyone had wanted Avengers to be in the first place, no one gave it a chance. It might be one of the biggest examples of wrong place at the wrong time I've ever seen from a video game. If Guardians had been released first, or if Avengers just didn't happen at all, I think this game would have been huge. If there is one piece of good news, it's that people did eventually start to come around on it. Square Enix reported in late 2022 that Guardians had reached 8 million total players thanks to its inclusion in Xbox and PlayStation subscription services. I would guess that number grew even higher following the third Guardians of the Galaxy movie releasing in 2023. While this doesn't exactly help total sales numbers, I can at least rest easy knowing a lot of people out there did end up giving it a try. If you haven't yet, I highly recommend it. It's still on those subscription services, and as of the time of writing this, was on sale for less than $10 on PSN. I do not think you will be disappointed.